Cody, the first game is going to be the NFC Championship. That game is going to be on Fox at 12:05. So set your timers on Sunday, everyone. It's going to be the Green Bay Packers versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It is in Green Bay. This is actually the very first postseason meeting between Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, that makes sense because Aaron Rodgers is in the NFC and Tom Brady is in the AFC, so they would have to meet in the Super Bowl for that to even be a stat. So, Cody, who do you think is going to win this game? What are your expectations for this game, and why?
Well, I think for my expectations for this, I think I'm going to side with, I think the momentum's going to roll with Green Bay. They're the number one seed in the NFC. They obviously handled the Rams with basically almost a number one ranked defense in the NFL. I think they're ranked number 2 behind the Steelers. And anyways, Aaron Rodgers had his way with them. Nobody can stop Devontae Adams, and he was spreading the ball around. Aaron Jones looks pretty good. Obviously, if they focus more on a balanced run pass, it would be a different story. But I know that you're really crazy about Tampa Bay's defense. I'm not so high on them, to be honest with you. I think they got really fortunate playing a very old and broken down Drew Brees, and that's what made it easy for them. But I think them going up against Aaron Rodgers, who's quite possibly the most talented quarterback that we've seen. I mean, arguments could be made that, Mahomes and Rodgers are on the same talent level. But I think for the most part, I like this matchup for Aaron Rodgers. I think he'll do really well against this Tampa defense. And, I think they're going to score a bunch of points. I think Tom Brady is going to show up for sure. He always does in the playoffs. And I see like it being a high scoring shootout type of game, but I think Aaron Rodgers at the end of the day pulls it out and represents the NFC in the Super Bowl.
Sorry, there's like jets going over my house right now. So I'm like, come on, seriously. Yeah, you're right. I have been very high on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. You're absolutely right on that. But with what the Packers did, now I do want to shout out Jared Goff for being injured. He looked good. I wouldn't say he looked great. I wouldn't say he was. It's kind of hard for me to say he was good. I want to say he's okay.
He looked good for a quarterback that was 3 weeks away from thumb surgery, as well as you can be at that point,
Exactly. He looked better than he did in the last week game. So, I was quite impressed because it was not, warm in Green Bay. Cam Akers was running rampant, and I think maybe that kind of helped Goff play a little well. So that's kind of what I am looking for. If the Buccaneers really want to win the game, Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette really are going to have to start getting that momentum going forward. They're going to have to set the tone for the Buccaneers. Yes, we know Tom Brady, he's the GOAT. He's got 6 championships. Yes, he does. You're right. Not questioning that. But there was a couple of throws, and you were over at my house. He made one throw where at first we thought it got picked off. He threw it really low to Chris Godwin. And then at first I was like, man, why did he throw that? You kind of saw what he was seeing and he wanted Chris Godwin to do. And it kind of made me concerned, honestly, because Chris Godwin and Tom Brady have had a really good connection all year long. But in this postseason, they just don't seem like they're on the same page, and Godwin isn't making the big plays. Mike Evans has stepped up a little bit more than Godwin now. Gronk has been kind of almost non-existent. Cameron Brate was the leading receiver for the team last week. Antonio Brown, I'm glad he's hurt. I hope he's out. But I mean, in all seriousness, this Buccaneers team, let's be honest, they're stacked offensively and defensively. This team is stacked, but they have an issue right now of not all being on the same page. And you're exactly right, Cody. I couldn't agree with you 100% more. That the Buccaneers are lucky they ran into the New Orleans Saints, a Saints team where Drew Brees is not the same. He's not the Drew Brees that we know, and it's okay to say that. it bugs me because like you and I, we were talking when we were hanging out. I was like, Drew Brees, he needs to retire. He just needs to retire. He's not the same quarterback. And you're like, yeah. And it's just funny if you say that like on Twitter, and you look at Twitter, if you say that to someone's face, they're like, well, Drew Brees is so good. It's like, I'm not saying Drew Brees was not a good quarterback. He's a Hall of Famer. There's no question in my mind. But this year, he has actually, honestly, in my opinion, the last 2 years, he has not looked good.
Well, the two major injuries that he's had, so outside of his elbow injury, the two biggest injuries he's had was his broken thumb last year, which took him out for a considerable amount of time. That's why Teddy Bridgewater had some game time action, in which, by the way, got him his Carolina contract. And then also, too, the multiple fractured ribs that he had this season that had Taysom Hill in there. And we basically saw that Taysom Hill is not a number one quarterback. He's a specialty weapon, and he can just conveniently throw, but he's definitely not the quarterback of the future for the Saints. And if they are, they're taking a step backwards for sure.
And it's funny is I was listening to the Bill Simmons podcast earlier this week, actually on Monday morning, because he records after the Sunday games, and it was funny because him and cousin Sal were saying the best quarterback in the Tampa Bay and Green Bay, because I'm looking at it right now, Tampa Bay and New Orleans game was Jameis Winston. They're like, man, he was perfect. It was 100% completion. So it's kind of funny, but I mean, in reality, he looked like he was the best quarterback on the field. Granted, I mean, he didn't throw as many times as they did, but I mean, Tom Brady, he looks better than Drew Brees. I don't think that's a question.
Right.
Drew Brees looks done. You're exactly right. With all the injuries that he's had accumulated, what did we expect? I mean, for the most part. And that's why I said I want to see him retire. Like, I want him to still have – because it's kind of the same at Peyton Manning. Like, Peyton Manning, obviously he was done. And luckily he was on a team that – had a lot better of defense. I think had better weapons, offensive weapons when he was there than what Drew Brees has. Drew Brees has right now broken down Michael Thomas. I don't think Michael Thomas has been 100% all year long. Alvin Kamara has probably been the best player, but he has been injured in and out this year. That offensive line is not the offensive line that Drew Brees had when they won the Super Bowl. The defense, I know a lot of people are really high on this defense. They have a lot of good players, but this defense is easy to figure out. I've noticed that all the time. The Drew Brees teams have to score at least 25 points a game. And I mean, yes, you could probably make the argument that a lot of teams have to, but you don't want to have to always score 25 to win. You want to have some of those games like, the 10-6 type of games. You want those close games and know that your defense is going to hold their own, and you just have to worry about the offense. And knowing Dennis Allen as much as we know him, because when he was with the Oakland Raiders at the time as the defensive coordinator, he wasn't great, and he was also the head coach at one point too. So listen, I mean, Dennis Allen, we know he's not the greatest. We know he likes to blitz a lot, and he puts a lot of pressure, and it helps that they have some guys who can do that, but they don't really have guys who can be consistent at the defensive position. And so that's why I picked the Buccaneers. I believe you had the Buccaneers winning as well, correct?
Yeah, I did.
So the Saints are going to have to find a quarterback. I think they already have one, to be honest. I think they should keep Winston, get rid of Taysom Hill, or, I mean, if they want to keep him, whatever. But I think it's a lot of money for a guy who's not going to play the position that he wants to play. And so, anyway, it was sad, but I figured Tampa was going to win that game, but it made me really concerned going into this Green Bay game. This Packers team, their defense is really good. That Jair Alexander, I mean, I knew he was good, but boy, I think all game long he gave up -3 yards.
Yeah.
So,
well, also too though, I mean, yes, he's a very talented cornerback, and there's been stats that shows when he locks up with a number one receiver, he's done really well. I will say though, although the same thing with Tampa Bay having a very good defensive showing was because of an older Drew Brees that, was playing like a guy that said he was done after this game, and, it was done. And then obviously Jared Goff was not 100%. I imagine if Jared Goff was able to be more effective throwing the ball down the field, I think the game would have been closer. I still believe the outcome would have been the same with Green Bay, but I feel like a handicap Jared Goff was just, a surefire thing for Green Bay to know that they were going to win. Their job was just not to mess it up. So,
Did you watch the Packers and Rams game?
I watched the third quarter and parts of the fourth quarter. And you can just tell, like, progressively throughout the game, especially like when I was turning it on for the second half, you can tell that Jared Goff had to slowly throw the ball down the field. He was basically doing screens, nothing further than 5 yards, and then he would have one throw like 8 yards, and then hopefully the receiver can turn it up. He definitely went to Robert Woods a lot, like in the flat and outside. Cam got a lot of good runs, but once essentially Green Bay was able to kind of sit down and basically challenge Goff to throw it down the field, they weren't the same team. Like, granted, he still had some good throws, but he wasn't able to continue doing it and obviously you can tell with his thumb basically being 3 weeks out of surgery, he was just doing what he could, and and it felt like the whole time Green Bay was in control of that game. At no point did I think Green Bay, it was going to slip out of their hands, because even when the Rams would drive and they would get in scoring position, they would either do a field goal or a touchdown. Green Bay went right back and scored like that, like it was nothing. And it just felt like that Green Bay had this game, and it was just up to them not to give it up. So
I will give it to Matt LaFleur. They really confused that Rams defense, and actually that Rams defense was the number one defense. You were saying they were behind. They're actually the number one defense. So they confused them a lot. I know there was one play that everyone keeps showing about Devontae Adams, going in motion on that touchdown that he caught. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, Jalen Ramsey, he messed up, and he's just trying to make." No, Jalen Ramsey was right in that instance of he knew, and you could see him kind of say something, and it looked like he was trying to get the attention of the other cornerback to kind of shift over, so that way he wasn't caught off guard. And so by the time they threw that touchdown or whatever, Ramsey finally got there, and he turned right to the guy and was pissed. And that's what he was pissed about, because he had to go around the whole defense. So he was like, hey, switch. And they weren't switching. So to me, that game actually felt a lot closer than what the final score said. The Packers really, really weren't pulling away. Like you said, when the Rams scored, then the Packers would go and score. But if the Rams didn't score, it just seemed like the Packers weren't doing anything. But granted, the Packers did go down a couple of times, and they had a couple of big runs here and there, and that's what really sealed the game. But the 2-point conversion, I was with my in-laws who are Rams fans, and they were asking, they're like, do you go for two? Do you go for two when they scored the touchdown that made it 16 to I think it was 24 at the time, or now I can't think of what it was.
16 to 22.
No, you know what? It was 25. They had 25. That's why. Okay. So it was 16 and 25, and they're like, do you go for two here? And I was like, I don't know, man. I wouldn't. I just kick the field goal. And then because if you don't convert here, now you put yourself in a hole where you have to score every touchdown you score. Now it has to be a 2-point conversion. And the 2-point conversion play that they had was absolutely phenomenal. I was like, when they made it, they're like, oh, don't go for two. And I was like, yeah, don't go for two unless you have a play like that. I didn't know they had that. That was an amazing play. And honestly, on that conversion, it really felt like the Rams were going to come back and really do something. But unfortunately, they couldn't get anything going after that. That was their best play